Did turning 70 feel like the world shifted beneath your feet? Today, we are breaking the silence on the 7 toughest truths of life after 70. The things polite conversations skip, but your heart needs to hear. You will learn why retirement can erase your sense of self overnight, how silent loneliness steals health as fast as any illness, the hidden griefs that weigh more than funerals, what really happens to muscles, balance, and energy, and how to fight back, the subtle ageism that makes you feel invisible, the quiet dread of becoming a burden and how to release it, and finally, the strength inside you that most people never notice. Stay until the end. The very first challenge we cover shocks most people, but explains so much of the frustration you may feel right now. Type your city in the comments so we know where our glowing age family is watching from. If you value honest, science-based guidance for aging with dignity, please like this video and subscribe. Your support lets me keep bringing lessons that matter. Let's begin. Losing your identity after retirement. What happens when the title you've worn for decades, teacher, nurse, engineer, caregiver, suddenly disappears? That moment after retirement can feel strangely quiet. You no longer have a schedule to follow, a workplace to show up to, or responsibilities that defined your days. For many, that sounds like freedom. But for countless people in their 70s, it feels more like a slow erasure of identity. In my practice, I've seen this more times than I can count. People who spent their entire adult lives building something, careers, families, businesses, only to find that after 70, they're no longer sure who they are without it. They'll say things like, "I used to feel important," or "I don't know what I'm contributing anymore." This isn't just emotional. Research confirms it. Studies from the National Institute on Aging have shown that retirement is linked to a marked decrease in self-esteem and perceived purpose, especially in people who tied their identity closely to their work. That loss of structure and meaning can quietly feed into depression, isolation, and even cognitive decline. And this is even more pronounced for those who didn't retire by choice. A layoff, a health crisis, a caregiving obligation. Suddenly, you're home full-time, not because you wanted to be, but because you had to be. And that forced pause can feel like being pushed off stage before the show was over. But the real problem is this: no one talks about it. Friends may tell you, "Enjoy your retirement." Children may say, "Now you can relax." But what if relaxing feels more like drifting? What if the part of you that used to wake up with purpose now lies still, wondering what comes next? The transition is even harder for those who spent years caring for others. Parents who devoted themselves to raising children often struggle once those children grow up and move on. Caregivers of spouses or siblings may feel invisible once the caregiving role ends. You're no longer the one everyone turns to, and that shift can feel like vanishing. The truth is, retirement is a major identity crisis masked as a reward. We often think identity is about what we do, but it's deeper than that. It's about feeling needed, feeling useful, and feeling seen. When that's taken away, we're left with a question that isn't easily answered. Who am I now? Here's what I want you to understand. This feeling is normal. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you still care, that you still want to engage with life, to contribute, to matter. And you still do. I've seen people in their 70s rediscover themselves in remarkable ways. One woman started writing the stories she never had time to tell. Another became a mentor to young women in her community. One man who had been a mechanic his whole life began repairing bikes for children who couldn't afford them. None of them went back to work, but each of them found a way to reclaim purpose, to put their hands and hearts into something again. And that's the key. Retirement is not the end of usefulness. It's a shift, a redefinition. It's a chance to be, not just to do, but it takes intentional effort. You have to give yourself permission to explore who you are beyond your title. You are still a builder. You're still someone who carries value. But instead of building careers or raising children, now you build peace, connection, meaning, and that matters more than ever. So if you're feeling lost in this chapter, know this: you're not alone. You haven't disappeared. Your name still matters. Your presence still matters. And your story is far from finished. In the next section, we'll talk about one of the silent struggles that often follows this identity shift, the creeping loneliness that no one sees but many feel. Stay with me. The silence of loneliness. Busy used to be the soundtrack of your life, phones ringing, coworkers talking, children laughing. Then almost overnight the house is still. No one needs a ride to practice. No deadlines press against your shoulders. At first the quiet feels like relief, but weeks pass and that same quiet starts to echo. Loneliness after 70 is more than being alone. It is the absence of feeling connected. You can be married, surrounded by neighbors, and still feel invisible. Research from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine shows that nearly 1 in 4 adults over 65 is socially isolated. Isolation isn't just an emotion. It raises blood pressure, weakens immunity, and increases the risk of dementia by as much as 50%. Your heart feels it, your brain feels it, your body keeps the score. Why does loneliness hit harder now? Part of it is practical. Friends move, partners pass away, mobility shrinks. Part of it is emotional. Children build lives that no longer orbit around you. But the deepest layer is unspoken grief. Grief for the version of life you can't get back. That grief can settle like dust on every moment, making even small tasks heavier than they should be. I hear it in my office every week. A patient says, "I don't want to bother my daughter," so she skips calling. Another says, "My friends don't drive anymore," so he misses lunch. These micro-choices repeated become walls. The silence grows, not because you prefer it, but because breaking it starts to feel awkward, even risky. What if you reach out and no one answers? What if you suggest coffee and hear an excuse? The fear of rejection can be stronger than the discomfort of being alone. Yet connection is medicine. A landmark Harvard study tracking adults for 80 years found that close relationships are the biggest predictor of late-life happiness and health, more than income, IQ, or even cholesterol levels. Relationships don't have to be large in number. They have to be real. One trusted friend, one weekly gathering, one volunteer shift can recalibrate your entire nervous system. So how do you restart connection when the silence feels thick? Begin small and specific. Phone one person each morning while the kettle boils. Join a class that meets on the same day every week, art, tai chi, a book club at the library. Consistency matters more than intensity. Familiar faces become friendly faces become friends. If mobility is an issue, technology can bridge the gap. Video calls may feel awkward at first, yet seeing another human face, seeing their smiles and small expressions, lights up the social centers of your brain in ways a plain phone call cannot. Ask a grandchild to set up the device and practice. The awkwardness fades, the benefit remains. And remember, offering help creates connection faster than asking for it. Knit hats for newborns at the hospital. Read to children at the community center. When you give, you remind yourself and the world that you're still part of the human fabric. Loneliness thrives in silence. It cannot survive conversation. One greeting, one shared story, one scheduled coffee can turn the tide. You deserve that tide to turn. In the next section, we'll look at a weight many seniors carry quietly, the layered grief of losses that aren't always visible to others, and why acknowledging that grief is essential to moving forward. Invisible grief and unprocessed loss. There's a kind of grief no one asks about. It doesn't come with casseroles or sympathy cards. No one calls to check in. It's quiet, unspoken, and it builds over time. I call it invisible grief, the weight you carry for the things you've lost that the world doesn't see. Most people think of grief only in terms of death. And yes, losing a spouse, a sibling, or a lifelong friend is devastating. But grief at this stage of life goes deeper than funerals. It shows up in everyday moments, the part of your life that feels like it's slowly slipping away without anyone really noticing. You grieve the loss of routines, the early mornings where you once rushed to get ready for work, the quiet moments when your partner used to sit beside you, reading the paper, the family dinners that now happen only on holidays. You grieve the loss of your role. For decades, you were the one people relied on, the mom who handled everything, the neighbor who always showed up, the mentor at work. Now no one calls for advice. You're proud they're independent, but a part of you aches to be needed again. And then there's the loss of your younger self. You see it in the mirror, in the slowness of your steps, in the effort it now takes to button a shirt or rise from a chair. No one warns you that one of the hardest parts of aging is watching the version of yourself you've always known start to fade. That's grief, too. Here's the hardest part. Most of this grief goes unspoken. You don't want to complain. You don't want to seem ungrateful, so you keep it inside, tell yourself to toughen up to move on. But unprocessed grief doesn't go away, it settles in the body. It shows up as fatigue, forgetfulness, mood changes, even physical pain. In fact, research from the University of Rochester shows that unresolved grief in older adults is directly linked to higher levels of depression, anxiety, and sleep disruption. Your body knows what your mouth doesn't say. I've had patients tell me they feel silly mourning the loss of things others wouldn't even think about, like no longer being able to drive at night or not being the one to host Thanksgiving anymore. But these moments are real losses, and grieving them is not weakness, it's human. So how do we process grief that isn't obvious? First, you name it, you say out loud, if only to yourself, what has changed, what you miss, what hurts. You don't minimize it, you don't compare it, you just give it the dignity of acknowledgement. Next, you find safe spaces to share it. That might be a trusted friend, a counselor, a support group, or even a journal. When grief is witnessed, it begins to release. Not overnight, not perfectly, but little by little it softens. Rituals help too. Light a candle on the day your spouse passed. Donate to a cause in honor of a friend you miss. Frame a photo from a part of your life that meant something. These small acts are ways of saying, this mattered, this still matters. And most importantly, you remind yourself that grieving doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It means you loved deeply. You lived fully. Grief is not a sign of being broken. It's a sign that your life has been full of meaning. As we move through our 70s and beyond, grief will visit. But it doesn't have to stay forever. When we acknowledge it, tend to it, and let it speak, it begins to change shape. It becomes softer, quieter, and eventually it makes room for joy again. In the next section, we'll talk about one of the most frustrating and overlooked parts of growing older, the way your body changes without your permission, and how that silent decline can take a toll not just physically, but emotionally too. Stay with me. The slow, unspoken decline of the body. You reach for a coffee mug and feel a twinge that wasn't there last month. The stairs you climbed in 2 minutes now take 5. You notice bruises on your skin and can't remember bumping into anything. Each change is subtle, almost insignificant on its own, yet together they send a clear message. The body you've lived in for decades is quietly rewriting its rules. This gradual decline is one of the hardest parts of life after 70, not because it happens, but because it rarely gets discussed beyond casual jokes about getting old. Behind the humor is frustration, fear, and sometimes shame. We live in a culture that celebrates youthful energy and hides the reality of aging bodies, leaving many seniors to wrestle with these changes alone. What exactly is happening inside you? Muscle fibers shrink, so even if you weigh the same, you lose strength. Starting around 30, muscle mass declines about 1% per year, accelerating after 70. Bones thin as calcium is pulled from them, the spine compresses and you lose height. Ligaments stiffen, reducing flexibility. Cartilage wears down, leading to joint pain. The circulatory system changes, arteries stiffen, making the heart work harder. Meanwhile, nerve endings decline, so balance becomes less reliable. None of this is sudden, yet its cumulative effect is profound. Physically, the consequence is clear. Tasks that once felt automatic require planning. Emotionally, the consequences are heavier. Every new ache can feel like a reminder that life is narrowing. Studies from the Journal of Applied Gerontology show that perceived loss of physical function is strongly linked to feelings of helplessness and lower life satisfaction. When your body says no to activities you still crave, gardening, long walks, lifting a grandchild, the mind can slip toward resignation. But decline is not a linear descent into frailty. The body remains adaptable even now. Strength training, as gentle as chair squats with light hand weights, can reverse up to 30% of age-related muscle loss within months. Flexibility exercises like seated stretches or Tai Chi restore range of motion and improve balance. A daily 15-minute stroll increases blood flow, supports bone density, and elevates mood by raising serotonin levels. Hydration, often overlooked, keeps joints lubricated and improves energy. Each choice is a vote against helplessness. Pain management also evolves. Instead of ignoring new discomfort, track patterns. Does stiffness improve after movement or worsen? Does pain spike with certain foods high in refined sugar? Keeping a brief journal helps find triggers and solutions. And don't underestimate medical guidance. Physical therapy, proper footwear, vitamin D, and calcium supplementation, all evidence-based tools that protect your independence. Perhaps most important is reframing the narrative. You are not failing. Your body is adapting to decades of remarkable service. Reflect on everything it has carried you through: births, jobs, travels, dances, storms. Gratitude softens frustration and fuels the commitment to care for what remains. Share your struggles openly. When one person names the fatigue of tying shoes, others nod in relief. The decline is unspoken only until someone speaks. By voicing your reality, you transform private worry into communal wisdom, and remind yourself that even as the body slows, your story, your insight, and your presence hold extraordinary power. Next, we'll examine how the world often responds to these physical changes, not with respect, but with dismissal, and why being treated like you don't matter can hurt more than any backache. Being treated like you don't matter. You walk into a waiting room and the receptionist barely looks up. A server at a restaurant asks your daughter what you want to eat. The pharmacist explains your medication in a tone reserved for children. It's subtle, but it stings. Being treated like you don't matter is one of the most painful, yet rarely discussed, experiences of aging. After 70, many people begin to feel invisible, not just physically, but socially, emotionally, and culturally. And it doesn't happen overnight. It starts slowly. People begin speaking around you instead of to you. Decisions are made for you, not with you. You might be asked how you're feeling more often than what you think. This is what researchers call ageism, a quiet but powerful form of discrimination based on age. It shows up in the way society markets only to the young, in how healthcare professionals rush through appointments with seniors, in how employers undervalue older wisdom. According to the World Health Organization, more than 1 in 2 people worldwide have ageist attitudes, and older adults who experience ageism are more likely to have poor physical and mental health outcomes, including depression and cognitive decline. But beyond the statistics is the lived reality. People who once ran businesses, led classrooms, raised families, now being talked down to, pitied, or ignored. I've had patients tell me they avoid asking questions during doctor visits because they don't feel heard. One woman in her 70s described being referred to as "sweetie" by a specialist who never made eye contact. A man who had once worked as an architect told me he stopped offering ideas during community meetings because he felt dismissed, like his contributions no longer counted. This experience is more than a blow to pride. When people are treated as if they're irrelevant, they begin to question their own relevance. That can lead to withdrawal, silence, and a slow loss of confidence. You start to wonder, is it even worth speaking up? Does anyone care what I have to say? Let me tell you clearly, yes, it is worth it. And yes, we care. Your insight is not less valuable with age, it's more valuable because it's been tested. It's earned. It's layered with decades of experience, failure, resilience, and perspective. But changing how others treat you starts with changing how you assert yourself. Speak up even when it feels uncomfortable. Ask questions at the doctor's office and insist on full answers. Make eye contact, tell your stories, correct someone gently if they condescend or ignore you. You are not being difficult, you are being clear. Advocate for yourself in everyday settings. If your server doesn't speak directly to you, respond directly. If a family member starts taking over decisions you can still make, let them know, calmly but firmly, that you want to be part of the conversation. And just as importantly, surround yourself with people who see your worth. Whether it's friends your age, younger people who respect you, or groups where your voice is heard, community matters. Isolation feeds invisibility. Connection restores presence. If you're in a leadership role at a senior center, place of worship, or local board, Invite other older adults into decision-making. Visibility is not just personal, it's collective. When one of us stands tall, others are reminded that they can too. The world needs what you still have. Your life experience is a source of wisdom, not a footnote. But sometimes you'll have to remind others and yourself of that truth. In the next section, we'll dive into one of the deepest fears shared by many people as they age. Not illness, not death, but the fear of becoming a burden. Let's talk about what that really means and how we can release that fear with dignity and self-compassion. Fear of becoming a burden. Ask most people over 70 what they fear most, and many won't say illness. They won't even say death. They'll quietly admit something harder to say out loud. I don't want to become a burden. This fear of being too much trouble, of needing too much help, of causing too much stress is heartbreakingly common, and it often lives in silence. People won't tell their children when they're struggling with stairs. They'll hide how much pain they're in. They'll skip meals rather than ask someone to cook, all because they don't want to feel like a weight on someone else's shoulders. I see it in my office all the time. A man with back pain refuses to ask his son for a ride because he's too busy. A woman recovering from surgery lies about how well she's doing because I don't want to worry anyone. These aren't isolated stories. This is a pattern of quiet suffering out of love, pride, and fear. But here's the truth. The fear of being a burden can become a burden itself. It creates emotional distance between you and the people who care about you. It prevents meaningful conversations. It blocks opportunities for closeness and connection, and it leads to unnecessary pain, physical and emotional. Where does this fear come from? Some of it is generational. Many older adults grew up believing in self-reliance and not imposing. You were taught to take care of others, not to be taken care of, and now needing help feels like failing that value. Others watched their own parents age and promised themselves they'd never end up like that. That image, the one of helplessness, has lingered ever since. But the fear also comes from how society talks about aging. We hear phrases like dependent, burden to the system, drain on resources. It's dehumanizing. It plants seeds of shame and silence that grow deeper with every passing year. Yet needing help is not the same as being helpless, and accepting support is not weakness. It's part of being human. The truth is, your family wants to help if they know how. Your friends want to be there if you let them in. And most importantly, you are still giving even when you receive. You give your presence, you give your stories, you give wisdom, perspective, and love. You may not change light bulbs or drive long distances anymore, but your value didn't retire. It shifted, and it's still very much needed. One of the best things I've seen patients do is reframe help as participation. Instead of saying, I don't want to be a burden, try, I'd love to be part of this in whatever way I can. You don't have to carry everything alone, and you don't have to feel guilty when someone lends a hand. Practical steps can also ease this fear. Start small. Install tools that support independence like grab bars, better lighting, or a medication organizer. Join a senior center or community group where shared support is normal. Plan conversations with family, not emergency ones, but calm, respectful check-ins where you can express both your needs and your desire to stay involved. You can also create what I call a dignity plan, a simple outline of how you'd like to be supported if and when you need more help. When done early, this empowers you to shape your future instead of fearing it. You remain the author of your story, not a passive character. Finally, remember, needing care does not make you a burden, it makes you human. You have spent decades giving, raising children, holding marriages together, serving in your work, your home, your community. This season of life is not a debt to be repaid. It's a continuation of your journey, one where receiving is just as sacred as giving. In the final section, we'll shift to something powerful, something that often goes unnoticed. The quiet strength it takes to age in a world that doesn't always see you. Let's talk about the resilience, the dignity, and the wisdom that make this chapter one of the most courageous of all. We uncovered 7 hard truths: loss of identity, creeping loneliness, invisible grief, the body's slow decline, being dismissed, fearing you are a burden, and the quiet strength you carry every single day. These challenges are real, but none of them define you. Knowledge, community, and small daily actions can turn each struggle into a stepping stone toward a life still rich with purpose. Tell me in the comments which point hit home the most, and remember to share your city if you have not yet. Your story might give someone else courage. If this video helped you, like it and subscribe to Glowing Age. Your click tells me these conversations matter and allows me to keep serving you with practical wisdom and compassionate science. Take care of yourself. Your chapter is still being written and it is worth reading.